I wanted to thank you for joining me on this episode of Doing Insurance Right. My name is Scott Jenkins, your host. I'm a local farmer's agent here in Phoenix, Arizona. And today I was going to talk to you about term life insurance and maybe a few mistakes you should avoid, or maybe things to just keep in mind when you're looking at purchasing term life insurance. The first one I wanted to go over is making sure you don't buy too little. When you're looking at just purchasing term, if you've made that decision, term is the best for me. We want to be looking at buying probably 10 to 12 times your income, because we are using that for income replacement. Remember, we are going to buy that if we are a married couple for husband and wife. If there is a stay-at-home dad, stay-at-home mom, they do add a value because they obviously are cutting costs. So we want to look at childcare, things that they do save us long-term by staying home with the kids. So making sure we put a value on that as well, and then doing 10 to 12 times is that. So making sure we get enough for both husband and wife and husband, whichever way it may be. The second one is obviously waiting too long for coverage. I understand that life insurance is probably one of the least, nobody wants to talk about death. And when it comes to the second, probably least favorite subject out there is life insurance. So people put it off. It's not a huge priority. The longer we wait, a couple different things. Obviously, the older we are, the more expensive it gets, and also the more limitations that you have as you get older. And typically, the unhealthier we get, the older we get as well. So that also is going to put a lot of limitations, or maybe companies we can go to with certain health situations. So making sure that we get this as earlier or sooner the better. As I'm sure you've heard before, the younger we can get life insurance, the cheaper it gets. And that is definitely the case when it comes to term or permanent, but definitely you'll be shocked at how low the rates are if we can get, let's say, in our late teens, early 20s, rather than trying to go buy it when we're 55. The next one I wanted to go over would be buying for too short of a term. So if we have a 2-year-old, do we want to buy for a 10-year term? Probably not. We want to probably get them through college is typically what I would recommend, getting the kids through college. If we're still planning on having kids, a 20, 30-year term is probably what we're looking at. I mean, when we're looking at the prices, a 10-year term is definitely going to be very tantalizing because it's going to be less expensive, because 10 years is not that long, especially when we're, in our late 20s, early 30s, and we're having babies. But making sure that we look at the term, how long the term is, if it's 10, 20, 30 years, just making sure that we get the right term for that, and discussing the differences between a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year term with our agent, or who's going over the life insurance with us, is going to be a big one. Because if we end up buying a 10-year term at the end of the 10-year, now we need to get a longer life insurance policy. Well, we've already got 10 years that we've spent on that, and now we need to go buy a 20-year term on top of that, when we could have got a 30-year term cheaper overall, or less expensive overall to start. The next one I want you to kind of remember is the riders that are on the policy that are available. Well, there are quite a few different riders. Buying too many maybe drive the policy up a little bit expense-wise, but there are some good riders to make sure you're aware of. Chronic illness or terminal illness is a good couple to have. Due to the fact if you are deemed terminal, a lot of times you can get paid half of your death benefit up front to help out with costs and care. If you're deemed terminal within a year, chronic illness, a lot of times you can get a percentage of your death benefit up front to help with care that way, and use it how you would like to, rather than to be put in a home. So if you'd rather be at home taken care of by family, you have the option to do that as well. So a lot of times making sure you look at those riders and what they can do or will do for you is a big thing as well. The last one I kind of wanted to go over is a big one for me, and I believe should be big for all insurance agents. We want to make sure you occasionally go over your policy. I don't recommend you have to do it once a month or anything like that, but going through your life policy once every 2 years or every other year is a great way just to make sure you're familiar with what you have. And also, if you have questions, make sure you ask your agent on what you have or what you don't have, to make sure you understand what's involved in that. That's a big one. There's nothing worse than paying for every month and going, I have life insurance, and you don't know what you have. You'd be surprised how many people I ask if they have life insurance, and they say yes. And I say, okay, great. Well, what does it cover? Is it just if you die? Yes. And then we look at a policy and it's only an accidental death policy. So they have to die by accident for it to cover anything. So they're paying for, they have to have an accident by airplane. They have to have an accident in the car, or let's say it's a work one. Well, can you take it with you? I don't know. Okay, great. So you're paying one at work that you're probably not going to be at a job for 40 years or 50 years. Now, what happens when you retire? Are you still able to take that policy with you even though you retired from that company? I'm not sure. So knowing what you're paying for is a huge one when it comes to any life insurance policy. So making sure you look at that every other year will kind of refresh your memory on what you have. And then also make sure you are looking for what you need as well that's going to fit you, your family, and your needs. So I wanted to thank you for joining me on this episode of Doing Insurance Right. As always, I would appreciate if you could rate, review, or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, whether it be Apple or Stitcher or Pandora or iHeartRadio or whatever it may be. And I will be looking forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.